Well, I'm going to start off by saying I'm going to do my best to go through. The intention here is that talking a little bit about data lakehouse and how we are fitting the data vault on top of the Medallion architecture, not only looking at the modeling perspective, but also looking as a methodology. And I'd like to, give you a quick demo in how to operationalize this modeling strategy and all the process inside of Databricks using DLT. So I'm going to do my best to make that happen. If for some reason I didn't get to the end, I'm going to ask Cindy to have myself again on the next meetup, if I may, and I'll be have more time to kind of demo that. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna do my best. I'm not gonna spend time introducing myself. Cindy, thank you so much for introducing myself. That was lovely. I felt so flattered. So I'm gonna just move on and just talk about what truly matters, right? Before I get into and that's an interesting topic, before I get into the real nuts here, I'd like to take a step back and think a little bit about what the data lake house means into today's world. Honestly, I had a pleasure to see and spot the rise of the data lake house systems back like 4 or 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, and that was crazily insane how companies started to adopt really quickly the data lake house. And the bottom line here is customers, they were craving to have something that guarantees you something, and that's the main reason why we have the adoption being extremely aggressive on the data lakehouse. Because data lakehouse, in fact, brings the best of the data warehousing plus the best of the data lake. So just put it simple, we have three stages. I like to break this in three pillars, I would say. The first one is you get your data ingested into data lake as a file format. And usually we use optimized file formats such as Avro, ORC, and Parquet. The next level up is where we establish the foundation of your structurized data, which is the data lake house, and gives you the asset capabilities. It turns the file format into a table kind of thing. So it's going to be transparent for the end consumers to look this as a table. So it gives you schema compliance, it gives you the asset capabilities, it gives the whole, comes with all the bells and whistles that we used to have in data warehouse systems. And today we have pretty much these three options available out there, which is the Delta Lake, that was created by Databricks, Iceberg that was created by Netflix, and Apache Hudi that was created by Uber. So those are pretty much run in the same layer. And on top of that, that's where things get a little bit nerdier, which is how you structure the data inside of your lakehouse system. And that's a so exciting topic, because when I started to deal a little bit with this bronze, silver, and gold thing, I sooner realized that, well, guess what we need to happen here? We have to have some practices. We have to do some modeling. We have to do some best practices here. Otherwise, we're going to fall short into issues like we know for the end consumers. So simply look by that is Medallion architecture is more than a data design pattern, which allows you to structure the data throughout these three different layers, meaning that you have your bronze area, which is pretty much your external data coming in. Then you have your silver, where you just do enough transformations. That's so funny. Whenever I hear about or see about just enough, something pops up saying what it means, just enough, right? And that's one of the biggest points and biggest hurdles about customers trying to understand what just enough means. But we're gonna unfold this really shortly. And lastly, we have gold, which is basically a project delivery specific where customers are going to connect with. So then we have these three layers well established, I would say. If you look at the literature, sorry, we have some books that talks a little bit about best practices around them, but in the end of the day, is a little bit uncertain and it's a little bit foggy how would properly work in the best practices inside of these three layers, right? So we're gonna dive a little bit on that. So I think it truly became like a universal struggle because people built by the book, they have these three layers well established as they think, but in the end of the day, there's just keeping having consultant engagements asking how they should do in a proper way, how they should optimize their costs, how they should lower the complexity, how they would lower the costs in terms of the ETL processes that are running to make all this process working end to end. So truly, the problem is not about the pattern per se. I would say that it's understanding a little bit about the maturity stage. So that's gonna leave people to pretty much understand in each stage they are right now and what are the next steps. And not only that, it's gonna give you like a more of a vision in how they would operate if you have to scale up this in such a way that you're gonna have to extend this for a broader company, or not only that, or you're going to have to deliver complexity things out of the Medallion architecture. Well, and then the first stage that I realized that a lot of customers they're into right now, which is the copy and paste architecture, which is unfortunate because in the end of the day, the bottom line here is just copying data through the bronze. You're just actually not doing too much transformations, not enough transformations on silver, and then you just ended up with data on gold. But if you look about the stages that we're like moving data through, basically we're doing pretty much adding a field into the bronze, and then we are like taking out the customer ID, for example, which is a minimal transformation. And then in the end, we're just renaming columns and delivering this data to the end user. And well, there's a couple of problems here that you must see it, is that first, we're not applying any actual logic on top of the data. We don't have any domain specific applied here that would optimize also the process. And we have a huge bottleneck, which is mimicking the actual current use kind of thing ETL process. So you're staging that into bronze. We're just doing light transformations and we're delivering to usually as a story schema or OBT. And there's a lot of complaints around this model. And the part that pretty much bothers me, it's about we talk about bronze, we talk about gold, but actually the structure it's in silver. Actually, if you'd like to take the best out of the Medallion architecture, for sure, you have to work your way out on silver. So you have to do things right on silver because this is the most important part. It's going to allow you to truly deliver quality in the end of the day for your gold users, for your gold dashboardings and use cases. So sooner they start to realize that they're copying data all over it. There's a lot of problems into that. They're running expensive ETL process used to running 2 hours. Now, guess what's happening? They're running 10, 12, 24 hours. We have seen that happening a lot, more than you can imagine. And then they sooner realize that they have to do something smarter regarding the silver zone, which now is that, okay, I understood that from the source system to the bronze in the way that I have to feed them, it's just like either you do CDC or you do a full ingestion, or you can even work in incremental. But in the end of the day, that's a pretty much straightforward way to accomplish this. You just have one-to-one mapping. If you have 100 Postgres tables, and if you'd like to go through the Medallion architecture, so you're going to end up with 100 tables sitting on bronze. And the idea here is you want to guarantee that you have historical information here. And that's kind of interesting because we're going to discuss a little bit about how that looks when we implement raw data vault or the data vault modeling inside of the Medallion architecture. So the second step is, well, I have the data seed on bronze. Now I don't have to connect and plug into the source system anymore, at least not for now. So now my silver zone can connect to the bronze and we can process the data. And then we have two segues here to follow. The first one is you can either clean your data, as you can see here. So we have a Postgres user on bronze, and you have a clean Postgres user on silver. And I can just make this transformation in between and guarantee that this data is cleaned up, is munched, is massaged properly. So basically, you're using option A, which is technical cleaning first. You're applying just, a lot of cleaning. You're just doing computational. You're not changing the granularity of the data, though, but you're adding some data lineage on top of this. Or you have the second option. You already have a maturity. You understand how the business requirement works. And for your specific domain, for example, you can simply go ahead and instead of building the second stage, you just build one stage way, which is going through Postgres user, MySQL user, and Salesforce user, and you consolidated them into domains. So you can create a user domain, a user product, a user transaction, a user order. So now it's just making it easier for people to consume downstream. So your downstream processes, they're consuming for the upstream, and they're now going to be way better in the way and way smart in the way in how they're going to build fast analytics on top of that. But once you start to step into the stage two, you start to realize something really funny here is that they're trying to build domains on top of silver to make your gold delivery faster. And that started to kind of bring a little bit about the vault structure, I would say. And that was kind of interesting to see how that unfolds the possibility for us to bring Data Vault not only as a methodology, not only as a model, but as a methodology and how we're going to build scalable modern data architectures on top of that. So in the end of the day, Silver is no longer just a clean zone of tables. It becomes a semantic core of the business. So we start to consider the Silver as the main plane for you to have all your data structured in. Well, now that customers realize the importance of the silver and how they're going to start to build from there, we start to get into the stage three, which is basically when gold becomes a religion, not a design. And here's the third problem that pretty scares people out is that now you understood that you have to do a really better job on your silver zone. You have to establish domains. You have to be extremely strict in terms of how you're going to allow your downstream resources to plug in. But unfortunately, you start to deviate a little bit about the architecture and the design per se, because now we have golds, and golds means like something truly specific for a specific use case and need. And now you just have upstreams connecting that unfortunately are being computed by other gold tables. And that's a huge issue because if, for example, the orders revenue summary V1 changes because a specific domain needs a new column or needs a different transformations, or even you're going to have a new version of the data of the table with a different schema information, that might break your downstream resources. So ideally, the gold data should be plugged in silver instead of the gold. So that's the best practices and where's the pattern truly comes in. So you ended up with sprawled overlapping layer off top on each of these other gold zones. Just not only make it hard for people to computationally do that, but also to not have the source of truth, because that gold that is just marked as red is just consumed for another gold. And eventually that one needs to be removed, and actually that one needs to be computed, queried from the silver layer. That would be the right way to go. And then that leads us to, I think, the best moment ever, and the stage that I truly trust and believe with all my heart that would be the next thing for people to understand, which is the vaulted lake house, when actually the architecture brings order to the scales. And believe me, just being boots on the ground and implementing a lot of lake house systems, I realized that in the end of the day, we don't follow a true modeling strategy. We don't follow best practices. We try to do this, but we're failing miserably because people are not thinking about foundational stuff. They're simply just like throwing things such as, oh, am I going to use Iman's strategy, or, oh, am I going to use Kimball's strategy? But it really is not about that, right? It's just about taking a step back and thinking, how are you going to structure your silver zone? Because if you do that in the right way, so guess what's going to happen? Then you're going to be able to use whatever you want in the end, because you establish a pretty deep foundational process in how to build gold that are trustable, deliverable, and just is going to make your customers happy. And before I get into that, this is pretty much, and sorry, Dan, I copy on that. There's the boarding car book where I just took this image out and just worked through the processes. So if you work a little bit about enterprise data warehousing and what truly we need to accomplish here, is just bringing analytics up to the table and just making sure that it's available for the end users to do strategic information and just being able to unlock their analysis, and just help them to guide the business from there. So you have your data sources, you stage them up into a staging area, and just bring a little bit about infusion in how we're going to bring this on the modern data era. We have the staging area that just pretty much behaves today in object storage, such as ADLS on Azure, S3 on AWS, and just GCS on Google. So just pushing this information to the staging area. So that becomes your in transit, your persistent staging area. And then you're just moving that to the enterprise data warehousing where you have your RDV and your BDV. And of course, you could either use Warehouse, Snowflake, BigQuery, ClickHouse, or any other vendor. It truly doesn't matter because, as Dan says, it's always about the logical, it's not about the physical. So logically speaking, you're going to end up with the same idea. The only thing is that once you start implementing it, then you should see different ways in how you're going to push this to leverage the best of the system that you're just putting. But the logical, it's totally more relevant than the physical. You have your complex business rules, and eventually you're going to deliver this data. Just looking a little bit about the needs that we have today into the analytics consumption side. For sure, the data warehouse systems, they're going to get even better at processing data at large scale with big tables. So if you're looking for performance perspective, OBTs are way far more performant than star schemas because in the way that it's shaped and just basically, done. A lot of techniques on the columnar area that makes the data way faster to consume. You're just consuming data for batches instead of row by row, and so on and so forth. And of course, that we cannot ignore. There's a lot of star schemas out there, and it's truly important. There's like some dashboarding tools that are really performant on star schemas rather than OBT, so on and so forth. And in the end of the day, I truly don't think that we have to say that we have to be strict in how we deliver the data because each user has a different need. So there's no way for you to pretty much come to the customer and say, hey, it doesn't matter what you think, I'm going to do this way. And if you want, that's the way how we're doing. I don't think it works this way. I think it's the other way around. I think customers just pretty much request, and you have to find out ways to make this. My true thought is about how you're going to structure the layer before in order to be able to deliver such thing that they want. And that's interesting because if you stop and think for a second and take a step back in the big breath, you're going to realize that data lake house is always meant to be a place where you're integrating this data. Because fortunately or unfortunately, we started we started the need to democratize the data because we used to build a lot of silos, a lot of data marts, and eventually the CEO would come to a specific area and ask, "Hey, how much you're making?" And then it was interesting enough. They used to get different numbers for different areas, and they would drive them nuts. Say, "What the heck? What's the correct number here?" So that created a lot of friction. That created a lot of issues around the globe for a lot of for decades. And then they sooner realized, well, we have to think in a different way. We have to approach this in a different manner. So what we're going to do is we're going to democratize the data. And alongside with this timeline, we started to see the rise of microservices coming in, just starting now to ingest and have way more ingestion backbone systems into different databases and start to spread out the data in different database systems. And we started to struggle with that because as a data engineering perspective, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on ingesting the data, massaging the data, and just connecting the pipes and make sure the data is going to flow through perfectly to the end user. So because I think, of course, there's a lot of other events that happen in that moment, but These are really crucial to make sure that Lakehouse became the de facto analytics backbone system because it offers you the capability of data integration. Actually, this is the best place for you to do that now. You have the data lake with just open freedom. It's really low cost and effective. And on top of that, you have lake housing, which is like the asset guarantees and all the good stuff that comes with all the bells and whistles that we know from data warehousing. So if, and that's a funny thing. So if Data Lakehouse is meant to be a data integration and Data Vault is just about how you build a structure, a governed integration place, and how you deliver this in such quality and programmed form, well, together they can be a match made in heaven for sure. And then I started to think a lot about this. And I started to bring this to my customers and just make them a lot of questions that was always boiling down to the point that, well, first, we need a structure. We need a way to make this work on Medallion. I don't know what it is. It doesn't work doing like three normal form, just pushing the data and just delivering to Go tables such as star schemas or OBTs. It's go way far beyond. It's a core component that was missing. And I truly think that Data Vault fills the gap here. It's just, I think it just comes in a perfect time in how you're going to create a really solid Lakehouse foundation that's going to unlock everything that Lakehouse and Vault can do together. And that brings me to a little bit of thinking through the maturity stage in three stages, right? So first stage, as you can see on top, you have like this company that is starting right now, they're still like moving data out from their systems and they're just pushing this data into the land zone. Then they have the trusted zone, and eventually they're going to refine the data to deliver this. And that's used to be the time and era where we used to have data lake available only. But then we just moved some steps up, and then we started to see, the momentum of the data lake house. And of course, that whenever everybody comes to me and says, well, I have a data lake house, I never seen not saying that we're going to use medallion architecture. So this is the data pattern that people used to follow here. And that's funny because it looks like an ETL, but it is not. It's a little bit different. It's an ELT, which comes with a lot of, I would say, tricks underneath it if you don't look. And many people truly underrates this, but actually I think this is really important for us to take a look right now. And that's the second stage where I start to realize that you're going to bring data to bronze, adding external metadata information. You're going to do your transformations that is just enough for silver. And then you're going to end up with some data marts and project specific database. But hold up. What does it mean adding metadata? What does it mean just truly adding just enough transformations? I have seen that before, but how that works, right? And when you look for the most advanced customers into their maturity stage, it's funny, but I unfortunately I can disclose the names of the customers, but all the largest customers that I met with, and I started to ask a little bit about how they structure the data lake house. I've always had two answers. Always. First, we are going through just grouping them in domains. And the second, we are heading to Data Vault because we realize that in our complexity now, the only thing that fits through in our state is just adding some methodology with a true Data Vault modeling that sits on top way more on data on silver rather than truly on the information delivery because it turns that they're going to use different targets. We're going to have star schema, OBTs, whatnot. So here, if we plot the data lake house if we plot the data vault inside of lake housing, what you actually have is your landing zone acts as a bronze table, as a bronze area. And your data vault sits truly, the modeling perspective sits truly on silver because it allows you to build the raw vault and just ingesting the data from bronze and also just building the BDV. But there's something that is just truly beautiful to see and realize here is that I don't have to copy and maintain my bronze anymore. These can, yeah, you can keep the persistent staging area, but you can have a non-persistent staging area here as well, because all your data is going to be compressed and added into the raw vault. So you're going to be able to audit, you're going to be able to see everything. You're going to have the historical information here. Everything is going to flow through here, because this is our starting point in how you're going to build the data vault properly. So consider the bronze as your staging area, but it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to keep the data there if you want. Of course, you keep it, but bear in mind that the data is going to sit on raw vault pretty well, and you're going to be able to accomplish everything you need. Well, and how do we just, truly dive into the implementation of the vaulted lakehouse? And this is truly how I think about this. You have your ingestion system. This ingestion system keeps feeding your bronze tables. And then you, as I said, you can have a persistent staging area sitting on bronze. That becomes your raw and immutable location. And of course, that for performance perspective, for example, before I get into the hard business rules, what I can do is maybe I can hash a hash hub customer ID, which is going to hash the data out here. So this way I don't have to do this multiple times. I have my hard business rules, and look at this. We didn't used to have any best practices and guardrails on Lakehouse before thinking about Vault and Lakehouse and Medallion architecture. And that's pretty cool, because now we can see that enterprise data warehouses is still hot on the press. And that's so true. And I got so surprised because when I submitted my session to Databricks, it was about data modeling, and it was just totally touched upon Vault. And we got 100, over thousand, yeah, presentations that were submitted, and we got like 600 accepted. And yesterday, when I went to the stage, it was fully packed. And then, the organizers from the company, from Databricks, they said, "Well, Luan, your session got you just blown up, and I'm asking if you can just make it again." And then today I woke up, I looked at the agenda, and it was full again. So data modeling is a big thing. And of course, that customers are trying to find a way how they're going to build a solid structure and govern uh, Lakehouse. And I truly think that Data Vault answers these questions. Honestly, I truly think on that. I can see, of course, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat, but I mean, I think that truly the best way to move forward, if you have to build that from the ground up and build a solid foundational process, you should go all in on the lake house. Then that's where it gets super excited here. We have your silver zone, which, thinking a little bit about the enterprise data warehousing, that's the place where you're going to consider your warehousing stuff, because bronze behaves as a staging area. So this is the place where we're going to apply all the data transformations that we need to do. Then we're going to set our raw data vault here with flexible changes. We're going to allow ingestion, append-only integrations, historical information. We don't have to do SCD anymore. Thanks God for that. I'll thank for the data lake house. I honestly don't see, I don't see, if you scale up your lake housing, I don't see a way without not having the business vault, because it's really important for end users and analytical engineers or whatever, any people that's connecting through the silver. They don't need to understand the raw data vault at that moment, because they truly want to connect, get the proper data, and just create their views and the project specific information in the end of the day. So I truly think that business vault, it's a huge thing inside of the lakehouse, because it's going to abstract the complexity that you have. And as Dan says, it's just, you can start virtualize it, and eventually if that performance hits pretty hard, then you can just, push this as a table, and then you can materialize it. And last but not least, you have the soft business rules. Now you can apply transformations that true changes the granularity of the data. It allows you to create different interpretations of the data. And then that's the tipping point. I seen a lot of customers juggling and just fighting against, oh, what's the model? I'm going to do it. And in the end of the day, I was just like, hey, it doesn't matter. And they're like looking at me and say, what are you saying? This is a big thing for us. It's just Bill him on Kimball, you just dance. I think we're looking at a different perspective. I'm just taking a step back on this, just building a foundational model, which is Data Vault, that makes everything organized in such a way that now, hell yeah, you just use whatever you want. It don't matter. It doesn't matter. Just what fits better for your use case. So I think approaching this way, it's going to be fruitful for them to understand the importance of how you're going to establish the foundation and laying out the data in the correct way. So then you choose whichever you want. You can either use star schema or you can just go full blown on OBTs. Or even better, you can mix and match, right? You can have some use cases that's going to better fit by star schema, other use cases are going to fit better on OBT. And that's the beauty of the data vault in my perspective, is that we're not offending anybody, we're just stepping their foot. We just actually say, hey, this is the way. And yeah, just maybe I'm just being too delusional here, but I truly believe this is the right way to do things if you truly want to do things in the right way. So this should be the direction. We are here like flagging is just screaming and say, hey, there's a way to solve this problem. And I'm just trying to push that hard as I can because I truly think that that solves a lot of problems that I've seen customers are struggling with. Well, and that brings to the point, yes, we understood that vaulted lakehouse is a big thing. There's a high chance if you just do it properly that you can transform your business in such a way that you're going to be able to unlock things that you didn't do before. And how you do this inside of Databricks. And just, touching to that point, we have something pretty nice on Databricks, which is DLT, which is Delta Live Tables, which basically allows you to create graphical DAGs, which are graphically beautiful, and then can process data in different ways using Spark code. I don't know if you guys are aware, but today they released this open source. So DLT now is open source. It used to be totally proprietary from Databricks. They're just releasing to the public. This is a big thing. I think that's going to reshape how people build data engineering platforms, data engineering pipelines. I'm super excited for that. So it's just, before me just getting too much into the PPTs, I would like to show you a little bit how it looks like. So I'm going to skip that part a little bit. But trust me, I'm going to show you how it works. And it gives you a lot of things out of the box. So you can either do streaming and batch transparently inside of Spark. So what it means is you have Spark, which is open source. Then you have like a framework that sits on top of Spark that allows you to make even, I would say, easier to deal with Spark code. So basically you can decorate your code with DLT, and then in the end of the day, it's going to transform this into a visual DAG. It's just pretty much same applies to Apache Airflow, for example. You just write a Python function and then builds up like a really nice graphical interface on top. So DLT is just about that and comes with some really good things out of the box. So we have like freshness of the data. You can materialize views. You can just build views from the inside out. You can add quality rules on top of that. You can reuse these type different strings. And of course, you can build end-to-end data vault process using everything that we said here before using DLT. So you can push data from different sources, either in batch or streaming or CDC-ish. You just bring these tables to a staging area, which is the bronze. Then you just work your way out into the raw data vault. After you get that part done, you can virtualize your business. And then with your business layer sitting next to the raw data vault and allowing you to query the raw data vault, you can start to create information delivery, which can be like marts, can be virtualized tables, can be like endpoints to the application, can be OBTs, whatever you want. So it gives you the freedom to choose what you want to do. And it also gives you another extra capability, in my opinion, that a lot of people is going to benefit for querying the data from the gold zone, which means that you can use like tools such as dbt, SQL Mesh to make your queries on top of that materialize on a modern data warehousing and push them there so we can have different use cases being filled up there. So yeah, I think I just talk too much. Sorry for that. So at least we have 10 minutes to do a walkthrough through the demo, and I'm super excited to show you this firsthand. Because I just want to make sure that we're gonna do something really good here. Let me stop. So this is the Databricks panel. That's pretty much available everywhere. This is the Azure one, but actually doesn't matter in the end of the day. So this is pretty much the same thing. It's just available across the board for Azure, GCP, and AWS. It's just kind of abstracted in the way that we deal with the cloud computing. But anyways, so this is the first glance regarding that. We have like here in the left the workspaces and configurations such as computation and workflows. The second part is you have the SQL use SQL engine. And then lastly, you have your data engineering. And of course, if you like to build agents, if you like to do a machine learning process, you have the AI ML. The beauty, the good thing about Databricks is that everything is just based on openness. So whenever you bring the data from the ingestion zone into the Delta Lake, it makes immediately available on the DLT. It makes immediately. So yeah, so you have your way to make data without copying the data all over. Instead, we're using data virtualization techniques around that. So let me quickly show you about not only this, but how you're gonna create a governed place using Unity Catalog. So Unity Catalog allows you to pretty much store your data in one single place, but it gives you like a lot of capabilities off the shelf, such as lineage. It gives you some AI capabilities as well. It gives you track about everything that you're doing inside of the Unity Catalog. But not only that, it expands in such a way that you can create, for example, external data links. So if I come here and create external location, what I can do is I can pass to Databricks an external location place, which can be an Azure data lake, which can be an S3, which can be different places. In this case, since I'm sitting under Databricks, since under Azure, I have the capability to connect me Azure Data Lake Storage, which allows me that whenever I have data flowing through the Azure ecosystem to the container, to the data lake, I can immediately see this data in Databricks. We're not copying this data, we're actually accessing through a virtualized storage. So it's a pass-through to check the data inside of there. So as you can see, there's a bunch of files from different places sitting into the data lake. And there's like thousands and millions of files, like small files, which we like to cause a lot of problems with the small files problems. This is like a well-known issue on Spark. And this is quite interesting to show as well. So we have a lot of files, and inside of these files, we have the data of users. We have different data here that we're gonna work through this inside of Databricks. So this is how we start to build our pipelines. So we have the DLT, which is Delta Lake tables, and there's like two things that I love about it. First, it's easy to do. Second, you can write your whole code using SQL statements. How cool is that, right? And not only that, you interact with batch and streaming in such a way that's pretty easy and straightforward to follow. So for example, what I'm doing here is, and let me just zoom in. So I'm just creating a folder, call it ingest. And what I'm doing is I'm simply saying, hey, create or refresh a streaming table for me. Just looking for that specific location that I showed you right now, which is the blob storage plus SQL plus users, which means that I'm just watching right now the SQL area, waiting for new events to come in, for new files to come in. So whenever a new file pops in, just shows up in this folder, I'm going to automatically pick that up because I'm just using streaming table. So it's just like I'm just watching that, and a new event comes in, this new file gets written into the storage, then I can immediately process that. And I'm just inferring some interesting information here, such formats. I would like to infer the schema from, so that's fine. It's going to try to read the JSON schema and map into the data. There's something interesting about Delta Lake is that you have the ability to do scheme evolution. So then if you have changes on the JSON, they're going to try to infer and just, if it's a new column, it's going to create automatically for you. And then here I'm just accepting 10,000 files per trigger. So whenever I trigger the pipeline, I'm just accepting no more than 10,000. This is just adding some guardrails here to not blow up the system here, right? And as you can see, I'm just building this for all the tables that I have right now. Because again, here we have the data lake, which is the file format. And once I create the data, the refresh streaming table, that file will turn to be a table in the end of the day. It's going to be a delta table. So as you can see, I'm just simply ingesting the data, adding some metadata information. Something really cool about Databricks is that you have this underscore metadata dot, and then you have file path, you have modification time, you have the transaction date. So I have a lot of metadata information, which is perfectly aligned with Data Vault. So we are adding metadata to bring the data into the raw data vault. So I just did this for all the files available. So we have status, we have orders, we have restaurants, we have drivers, and we have users. Now that I established the bronze area, I'm going to do something even better. I'm going to, before I start to truly process the data and sense the information as fast as I can in a pen-on manner into the raw data vault, I'm going to prepare the data between, because now I just want to make sure that whenever I query the data from this bronze data, I'm going to query from a view instead of the JSON file. So what I'm doing here is that now that I have this bronze data, instead of querying them directly ingesting into the raw data vault, I'm just putting something in between, which is, making my life way easier by making sure that whenever I query that information, I'm just already creating the hash key, for example. I'm just adding the load timestamp. I'm just also putting the source name, and I'm doing this for all the tables to make sure that I have this before I just fill the hubs, right? So I just did this for all the tables. Now we have views that connect with me right now. Third step is, well, now that I have the views and I'm going to look for them, I'm going to start to load my hubs. And that's interesting because DLT allows you something really cool about constraints. So as you can see here, this is really cool actually. So I'm just querying the data from the data in flight. So new streams of data coming in. I'm just saying, hey, just give me the hash key, my true business key, and my load timestamp. I'm just considering this as source because I'm not going to ingest data from users, but also I'm just ingesting data from MongoDB and SQL. So we're going to have two different sources, which means two different satellites connect into a hub. So instead of me adding like MySQL and SQL, and then having the same license number or whatever CPF, which is like pretty much the social security number in different sources, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choosing DLT because this is the ETL process that are running now. But the interesting part is I can add a constraint, and that constraint expects the hash key to not be null. And here we have different ways to do this, but here what I'm saying is on violation drop row. And that's kind of interesting because now the release that I've got out today is we can create a quarantine table that whenever we add violation drop, it sends you to the quarantine. So this way it gives us the ability to get back on business, understand, and treat the problem where it actually needs to be treated, which is on source, right? We're going to raise that up to the business and say, hey, we do have a problem. We cannot allow, social security numbers to come in the wrong way or empty, whatever. So let's work on that. So you're not inferring any problems into the data vault. So I'm just filling up the hub users, hub drivers, hub restaurants, and hub orders, the same way that I did it before with that one. Now I'm gonna build up the links, and eventually for the links, I'm gonna, of course, just following the same idea and strategy that we did it before. Now I'm gonna do the satellites, right? I'm just filling the satellites and just making sure that I'm not duplicating the data in any sort of manner. And whenever I run this, I compile this pipeline, what I'm going to see, and that's so beautiful. Hold your horses. Look at this. Just kidding. You're going to see like the creation of the DAG per se, which gives you the complete visualization end to end, graphically speaking, about what we built right now. So the first thing is we had our streaming table, which is a bronze data, which took 32 minutes and ingested 2.6 billion data points. And then remember that I created a view to abstract and create already the hashing. So this way I don't have to create the hash multiple times to load the link, to load the satellite, to load the hub. I'm just doing this encapsulated through a view. And then I'm just serving the data out to build the hub links and sats, right? And here I can see the schema that I changed. So you can see there's already a hash key here. And that streaming table, that view is going to fill up the hub orders that took 15 minutes to ingest 289 million. It also is going to connect with the satellite orders that took like 2.6 billions in 2 minutes. That's freaking fast. And the reason why it's freaking fast is Databricks per se is really fast engine. And the best part is we're using serverless computation. We're not even choosing which cluster you're working in. We are actually just leaving Databricks to decide what's the best engine, what's the best cluster, what's the best configuration to run underneath the hood. And yeah, as you can see here, you can graphically see the data. It took me 50 minutes to load trillions, almost trillions of the data from different places. And I can actually see something really cool about the data quality checks. So as you can see, for example, let me just pick the hub users. We have had like 100%, 288 million rows. Thankfully, we didn't drop any one of those. And we have the expectations here as well. So the beauty of Databricks alongside with the DLT is that gives you this whole image and graphical information about what you're doing. You can also list that up. You can change a different way and you can see how many rows were written, the duration of each one of them, if they're like incrementally computed or not. And I didn't have time to go through the business vault, but if I get back here to the graph part, you're gonna see that also I'm just extending from sat. I'm just creating my peak table, I'm just creating my bridge table, and I'm just creating everything. And whenever I get a new data coming in, I just gonna process this incremental data in fed into the Databricks, building the raw data vault, business data vault, and eventually creating my gold layer, which is like either store schema or just OBTs, right? Um, and I think that's it. I think I'm on time. I made it. Um, Cindy, I think I'm just pretty much done and can open for questions if they have. But I would say thank you so much for your time and I truly appreciate. I hope you
Thank,
guys like it.
thank you, Juan. Yeah, we have 7 minutes for questions. So I actually there is a question that I saw pop up here. Sakib wanted to know, how do you get notified that there is an issue with the data?
That's a good point. What we can do is we can extend the Databricks Genie AI capability and we can have a dashboarding that looks up for the quarantine data. So whenever you have this, it can triggers like through a webhook into Slack or Teams and can even go through your email if you want. So this is one of the ways that we can track, for example, for problems before it arrives on the data vault.
Okay. I have another question for you. Is it possible to have complementary columns in different satellite tables? And the reference is Mongo underscore users with a user ID and a name, ERP users with a user ID and a birth dates with status.
Yeah, you mean if you like to extend, if I got it right, if you'd like to extend the schema, yeah, for sure you can do it transparently.
Okay.
One of the
Yeah.
beauties
So
to
if I
attending to
can,
the certification. Yeah, you can
so if
chime
I
in.
can just mention something there on. So if you're building a hub based on user, and I'm going to make this statement, and you gotta step in on the Databricks side because I don't know the answer. Technically, what we do in Data Vault is you would have one integrated hub with your users in it, your user IDs that would be your business key, and then you would have a different satellite for, like for Mongo data coming in, or ERP, your ERP system data coming in. So we, in the raw vault at least, we segment your data. We don't conform a satellite. We segment it so that you have a direct lineage to, and the metadata matches to the incoming descriptive or contextual data over time. So I'll just add that. And I don't know if that helps with that answer or not.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think I got this way. So you have your hub and you have like your SQL Server, your MongoDB, your MySQL, your whatever source you have, Salesforce. Those are your satellites that plugs into the hub. And then you just decouple the business key on the hub and you leave all the descriptive data on the satellite. So this way you can evolve the satellite as much as you want because the business key is going to be exactly the same across the users, for example.
Thomas asked a question. Did you compare natural keys instead of hash keys for joining in Databricks?
Nope. Just what we did here is that before filling or just ingesting that into the raw vault, which is hub links and sets, what I did instead is I created a view that abstracts the need for me to always just because I have seen cases where, for example, you have one ETL that feeds the hub, another ETL that feeds the link, and another ETL that feeds the satellite, and they're computing the hash keys, every time. So instead, what you can do is you can even push these to hash them beforehand. So this way you don't have to do this a lot of times. So in the way that I put is that I created the view before filling the structure. So this way you're just passing through one lane and then just requesting all the inserts from that specific view. So that's going to make it easier for you. And we're doing a hash key on the business key and not on the surrogate key, whatever. So just using the natural key to do that.
And just to follow up on that, I believe what he's also asking is, did you do any performance comparisons between using just the natural business key versus the hash for your joins for Databricks? Did you do any of that?
I did. And in fact, I found much better because it kind of reduced the skew and shuffle if you do that properly. So by having the natural key without hashing it, you can end up with like skewing, huge skewing on the data. But if you do hash, probabilistic speaking is going to be less skew, which means maybe less shuffle. So it helps you on the long journey and just doing joins between the tables. So I thought it was way more performance than just only using natural keys.
I didn't scroll too far up in all the comments. I'm not sure if there's another question in here. Jim, did you guys see anything else?
No, I think everything else got answered. Correct.
Okay, beautiful. I'll scroll down. Any other questions for Juan before he has to run to his other presentation? We would love to have you back. I think if you guys are interested in having him come back and do a second presentation, maybe a deeper dive, we might pull you in on that. If you would just let us know, drop something in the chat for us, and we would love to have you back.
I would love to be here again, honestly. It'd be amazing.
Very well done. Thank you so much for your time. I know, and wishing you the best as you go in and present a second time.
Thank you so much.
All
Thank you
right.
guys for supporting me. It was a pleasure being here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. See you soon.
Thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, I am going to turn this over to AO to go into our sponsors. Sponsors, thank you for your patience. Let me get the presentation back up. AO, would you like me to drive the slides?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right. So we're going to be hearing from 5 sponsors. So AO, I'm going to click on the first. Here we go.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience. So I have the privilege to welcome the Bernard Decon from De facto. Sorry if I didn't pronounce your name very well. So this company is at the forefront of helping organizations turn complex data into confident decision. So in a few minutes, you'll be hearing from the De facto, and they're going to be walking us through how this business is building scalable, trusted data environment. Please join me as we welcome the Bernards. Kone from the Farco. Thank you so much.
Hi everyone. You can actually call me Ben. It's easier and shorter. So thank you for the introduction. Indeed, I'm from De facto. We're a data vault automation software, and actually since 2023, we're the only company that achieved the Data Vault 2.0 certification by the Data Vault Alliance. What we do is really simple. We have a platform in which you actually start from the business needs, which means that you create your hubs, your links, and you can sit with the business users as from day one. You make the model, you go grab the data, and then we automate 80% of your data vault, which makes that we help you focus on delivering the business value, focusing on making the data product. The solution works both on-premise or in the cloud, depending on your preferences, and we generate the code in your preferred data platform, which can be Databricks, Snowflake, or most, I would say, older database such as Oracle or IBM DB2. We are quite flexible on that kind of stuff. And I will stop it here for this quick pitch. Thank you everyone for listening to me. I'll just put my LinkedIn in the chat, so feel free to connect with me or send me a message if you want to have more information about what we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Benoit. Oh, I'm up. I'm going to make mine quick. Data Rebels is an authorized training organization for Data Vault Alliance. I am a certified instructor, actually certified trainer now as we're changing terms, for CDVP 2.1. This is our latest release. So Data Rebels, we also provide not just training. Our philosophy is that we want to train your teams to fish, not give them a fish. That's been our philosophy from the beginning. We want to build strong teams that can deliver reliable, resilient solutions for you in Data Vault. So we also do a Kickstart. We have a Kickstart program. This is a 10 business day program where we'll come in, we'll train your team using the certified Data Vault course so that they are certified, have access to the exam and get certified. On day 4, after the 3-day course is done, we immediately start a well-scoped build with your team that we have come to agreement with. So basically in 10 days, we train your team and we deliver a well-scoped solution or outcome, if you will, for your business, showing the accelerated capabilities you have with Data Vault, working with your team, following the standards, the processes, and the ways of working. So in addition, if you need consulting, I will, I'm happy to come in. Primarily, my consulting is coaching. It's helping your team get moving forward faster. As I always say, I don't want to be a butt in a seat, pardon my French. So I would prefer to come in and just help your team get moving. And then perhaps do touch points to make sure that things are progressing as they should be. And then finally, we also do a 4-hour workshop. These are basically 4-hour segments that we'll pull together. You can use them in any way you need to help your team get moving, to solve a specific sticky problem you may be having with data, whatever you need. So these are smaller increments in 4-hour blocks. So that's what I do. So anyway, that's Data Rebels. Thank you for your time, and I'm gonna jump to the next slide.
Thank you, Cindy. Yeah, thank you so much. So next we are going to be having Paul Kana from EHO Collective here.
Don't see Paul on the list.
Well, we will move on then.
Okay, we're going to move on to the Wescape. Then we are going to be having Patrick.
I was waiting for you to say the last name. My name is
I don't want
Patrick.
to. I don't want to murder you, so I have to stop.
I've heard many variations of it. My name is Patrick O'Halloran, and I'm a solutions architect with Warescape. Warescape's a software tool. We're working with Data Vault for a very, very long time. In fact, one of my little, I wouldn't call it a project, one of my little investigations was trying to find the first time someone had used Warescape to build a Data Vault. And Ken Graziano told me that in 2009, he saw his first demonstration of Raphael in Denver using Warescape to build a Data Vault. So we're very happy to be working with Dan and Cindy. I really love the DBNOG group. I'm here as a sponsor, but even if I weren't sponsoring, I'd still be showing up and listening. Luan's presentation was typical of the really good stuff we get to see here. So Warescape, I guess I should talk about my product. Really with Warescape, what you do is you start at the conceptual level, not even the hub satellites and links level, but the taxonomies and ontologies. What is it you're reporting on? How are they related? All the business objects. From there, you start tying your source systems to that conceptual model, profiling that, and then we use rules to generate the hub satellites and links. That's then pushed out to our builder tool, and that generates the physical model. It's a wonderful tool. We're at warescape.com. If you want to check it out, there's a couple buttons on there. I believe Contact Me is on the front page now. Request a demo. We would love to talk to you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That's so brave. The sponsor right now, we are going to be having Ryan from here studio. Yep.
Always tough to follow up Patrick. He's such a good presenter, but yeah, thanks for your guys' time. Yeah, my name is Ryan Hirsch. I'm the product marketing manager for ER Studio, which is one of the leading data modeling platforms in the industry, helping you to design, govern, and deliver business-ready data with greater speed, accuracy, and consistency. ER Studio supports the creation of enterprise-level conceptual, logical, and physical data models. We're fully integrated with governance tools, including Microsoft Purview and Calibra, as well as integrations with Jira and Git. So if you're working with data vaults, you know the importance of structure and flexibility. And ER Studio really was built with those principles in mind. It provides support for data vault modeling, including wizards, templates, and automation to help you quickly create hubs, links, and satellites. It also integrates glossary terms, lineage, and metadata directly in your data vault models, making it easier than ever to align all your business requirements. So from data vault design to data governance, ER Studio allows you to model faster, collaborate smarter, and maintain structure from day one. So if you want to see how it all works, including our automations with data vaults, we'd love to show you a live demo. Please feel free to visit erstudio.com, and we're happy to share that with you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Ayo. And thank you all of our presenters from our sponsors. This is Noel. And for those of you who are here for the first time or may just be diving into Data Vault, you may not yet know that Dan Lindstedt, our next presenter, is the inventor, the creator of Data Vault. While many of us would ourselves say that he is a giant in the world of data, he would tell you himself that he stands on the shoulders of giants. Without further ado, Dan Lindstedt.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I learned all my lessons from my mentors. So I'm happy to have people like Bill Inman and so on in my corner, including Bob Seiner. Bob Seiner and I go way back, so that's pretty cool. I met him when I wrote my first article for Bill Inman's newsletter. Right after I came out of Lockheed Martin. So Bob and I have had many a night of discussions at the TDWI circuits in 2001 through 2007. So, you know, we ran the same speaker circuit and everything else. Anyway, I'm going to keep this short. These are my words of wisdom. I've already eaten up about 45 seconds, so I got to get going. So we're going to talk about Data Vault and Data Fabric. This is meant to be sort of a lighthearted presentation because your last modern stack was a dumpster fire. Otherwise, you're just layering dashboards on bonfire and calling it a strategy. And you definitely need some sort of organization to put a data fabric together. Now, why the title? Because a lot of folks in the industry, especially business and a lot of naysayers are turning out coming saying you don't need data vault, all you need is a data fabric. And so that's why we have the title this way. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about what that means. Hopefully everybody can hear me all right. Your last modern data stack was a dumpster fire. Well, otherwise you're just duct taping your KPIs to chaos and hoping for governance. That is if you don't use Data Vault. That is one thing that can happen. Another thing that could happen if you don't use Data Vault, and that is the solution to data warehousing and BI. You're just delivering insights from pipelines held together by sheer will and, of course, JSON. We all have heard that story. And then, of course, if you don't use Data Vault, your data strategy is a campfire story with missing chapters. And if you don't use Data Vault, your real-time analytics come with full-time firefighting. Welcome to the firehouse. And if you don't use Data Vault because a dashboard on top of data drift does not make it a data product. And so this is part of the problem. We have a lot of perception issues with what data fabric is. And today, unfortunately, the vendors own the definition of data fabric. And so therefore, everybody has a different definition of what data fabric really is, causing dumpster fires galore. And of course, the definitions of data fabric by the vendors only serve to sell more software from a vendor perspective. Now, I'm not saying it's bad, but it certainly is a smorgasbord of definitions. So let's throw that away. Can you build a data fabric without a data vault? And we get asked this all the time these days. And of course you can. Just like you can build a house without a blueprint, insulation, or doors, or even windows. But why would you, right? You cannot successfully build a data fabric without some kind of a methodology, architecture model, unless your goal is data chaos as a service. So what are you going to choose? One of these things is proven in terms of methodology and solution, and the other is a trending TED Talk. So that's kind of an issue there. Look, if you're skipping Data Vault, then you better build, document, and enforce every single one of the strengths that Data Vault brings, including methodology, architecture, patterns, roles, lineage, metadata, governance, and all of it. Otherwise, if you don't, you're not modernizing. You're just dressing your data swamp in DevOps and hoping no one notices the smell. Da-da-da. Welcome to the problem, right? So what are some of the good things? If you can combine Data Vault and Data Fabric together, which you can, you get decentralized change management from the Data Vault side and centralized governance from the Data Fabric side. You get orchestrating teams in Fabric-enabled vaults. You get methodology to Fabric alignment. You get hybrid logical physical vaults, and we started talking about that in the chat a little bit. And we've been talking about this for years, that the logical data vault model is far more important than the physical data vault model. And you see this when you implement a data vault on Google BigQuery, for example, right? So you can't necessarily build hubs, links, and satellites on Google BigQuery and make it run. So you have to do something to it. And that's normally denormalization. Vault is a control plane and Fabric as an access plane. Clear separation of responsibility in implementation layers. So that's pretty cool. And then metrics from metadata, turning Data Vault change logs into Fabric intelligence. Cool. Big highfalutin new terms. In terms of the modeling components, semantic decoupling meets structural integrity requirements. And those are the requirements for the data fabric side of the house, right? Policy enforced pipelines at the grain of Data Vault, active metadata synchronization between Vault and Fabric, unified governance from Vault via the raw lineage to the Fabric and the business views, and then virtualization and real-time access with Vault timed control. So again, is Data Vault the only way to build a data fabric? Of course not. Data Vault isn't the only way to build a data fabric. It's just the only battle-tested survival strategy to survive the complexity, chaos, and compliance without cracking. Right? So we've been around the block multiple times. We stand on the shoulders of giants. You can deny it, ignore it, or duct tape around it, but don't act shocked when your modern data stack folds the second that you need trust or an auditor walks in. So remember, reality doesn't care about your data architecture diagram, but auditors do. And what I'm pointing out are a lot of the holes in data fabric that a lot of people simply ignore when they're trying to do data fabric, right? So you've got all these people out there going, I got data fabric. What I'm also trying to tell you is you want to partner up with them, but you also want to absolutely challenge their thinking. Have you thought of this? Have you covered that? Where does your strategy mitigate this risk? Get them to answer these questions and think critically. Challenge these people in front of their peers, in front of their business management. And then when they don't have a solution, don't use the words data vault in front of the business. Simply say, we have a business intelligence or an analytics build solution that can work with the data fabric teams. Always make sure it's collaboration language. We can work with you and we can make this happen for you and for the business. Let's team up. Let's make a positive thing, right? So if you're not doing Data Vault, then you don't have the capabilities that Data Vault provides. You have to build them yourself. So the Vault capability here, hub link satellite layering, you have to build formal architecture, separation of grain and semantics. If you don't have historical change capture because you're using Data Vault for that, and you're not using Data Vault, then you have to build audit stores and slowly changing data disciplines. With Data Vault, you've got metadata output per load, and without it, you have to build your own metadata capture and policy triggers. And with Data Vault, you've got immutable data integration layers, and without it, you need to build your own formal rulebook test suite for curated zones. With Data Vault, you have DevOps ready components. Without it, you got version deploys for all pipelines. And you skip the fundamentals if you want, but know that your fabric won't blow up on day one. It'll just quietly rot under the weight of scale, trust issues, and data drama until it collapses spectacularly on the wrong day. So let's throw all that out and finish this up, right? So the Vault plus the fabric is the dream team you didn't know that you needed. But now you can't live without it, now that you know what Data Vault really does for you. It helps you with the teaming, it helps you with the methodology, it helps you with the architecture, the implementation, and the governance. It is not the be-all, end-all solution. Data Vault never was a silver bullet or a golden bullet. And just like Data Fabric isn't the be-all, end-all solution, but together they're stronger. So that's it. I've taken probably 8 minutes out of 5. So I got to leave you here now. Back to you guys.
Thank you very much, Dan. We are going to take a little 5-minute break. Thank you all for joining us. Following the break, we will introduce our other sponsors and then continue with Sam as presenting. I'm starting the timer now. Thank you.
Hey, Noel, how about some elevator music for the break?
No.
I didn't cue any up this time. I should have. I'll have to remember that for next time. And I think next time when I introduce Dan, we'll have his theme song.
Or the
Yes.
or the music from Jeopardy.
Yeah.
Theme song from Rocky.
Oh no, the theme song we sang at WWDVC.
Oh God, no, not that one.
I love that. I love that song.
Yeah, just call me the red shirt guy as opposed to the blue shirt guy in the movie, right?
I see that Peter commented calling it Dan the DV guy. Well,
Right.
that phrase is in the song. The song is technically titled "It Depends."
I think you need to sing it right now. No.
Oh no, by no means. Not without my keyboard and stuff.
We still are waiting for the recording on that one, but bro,
I am working on it actually. So, and I'm scoring the song as well. So you'll have a copy of the music and everything.
With the score and everything. My God. Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, another minute and 20 seconds, and we will resume with our sponsors. Had a really strange day the other day, though. Somebody stole my depression medication. I hope they're happy now.
yeah, I hope you guys liked all my puns tonight.
Yeah, there were some good zingers there.
So Noel, does the Price is Right need you, to announce something coming down from the audience?
Maybe so. I'll audition here. All right, just 20 seconds left. and we will be returning. And up first will be resultant. I will say that again in 20 seconds.
Not sure how I'm supposed to follow the dad jokes, but I appreciate the opportunity.
You know, when a dad joke becomes a dad joke.
Well, yes, when
Yeah.
it's
when
apparent.
when it's fully grown.
Oh,
Or when you have to explain it.
I thought when it's apparent, right?
Exactly.
and that's our timer. All right. I'm not sure that you guys are hearing that. I am hearing a ringer in my head. So here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, resultant will be up first with Chris. Wow. Take it away.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Waugh. I'm Chris Waugh. I'm a client partner here at Resultant. We are a data transformation consulting company that helps clients turn their data into a true business asset. And love being here to talk about and learn more about Data Vault because we really do this through the Data Vault methodology. We found it's an incredibly powerful framework for building trust, scalability, and providing real business value. So I wanted to share a recent example that we've had of taking the Data Vault methodology and using it and kind of the impact that we've seen. We recently partnered with a major insurance organization, one of the largest fraternal organizations in the world, to rebuild their data lake using Data Vault 2.1. So our Data Vault 2.1 best practices, top-down and bottom-up data approach focuses in on the business needs of turning raw data into business actionable information. So we work directly with business stakeholders to understand their decisions and the information they needed to support them. From there, integrated across 5 different applications, 5 different key product lines, and applied the business vault techniques to encapsulate shared business logic in a single consistent layer. This allowed us to quickly deliver a trusted star schema and information mart, fueling self-service BI and dashboards that leaders rely on every day. So a lot of what we just saw from Juan is exactly what we were able to implement and saw a lot of actionable value from that. So a lot of great strategic value and impact that we saw. Means that what we say, we take business-centric Data Vault. We're not just about modeling. It's also about delivering value continuously, incrementally, and with confidence. So they're now well on their way to achieving Medallion Gold status in Data Vault, gaining that insight through governance, consistency, and agility. So at Resultant, we use Data Vault not just because we care about it and believe in the methodology, but also enables our clients with the information they need to move faster and make better decisions. Gives us a structure for building foundation and framework of trust. And our main goal is anyone can take raw data and load it into a Data Vault, but at Resultant, we pride ourselves in taking that raw data, turning it into business actionable information so that you can succeed. So if you're looking to find out more about what we've done in the past and for other opportunities to take your data strategy to the next level, we'd love to be in contact with you. Please reach out. I'd be happy to connect. Thank you so much.
Excellent work, Chris. Thank you very much for Resultant. Up next for Vault Speed is Jeffrey Soretsky. Jeff?
All right. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeff Soretsky, Solutions Architect at VaultSpeed, and I'm thrilled to be here as a proud sponsor of our data group. Coincidentally, I'm broadcasting live from the Databricks Summit in San Francisco, where they highly advocated Data Vault. Believe it or not, they put white papers out to have a Data Vault at the silver layer. I'm like, yeah. Anyway, so what is VaultSpeed? It's a SaaS-based platform that helps agile teams deliver production-ready Data Vault pipelines faster, complete with full automation, governance, and documentation. And the best part, it's managed through a clean drag and drop interface. So VaultSpeed automates the entire life cycle. That includes delta generation. So when your model changes, and it will, we will keep the model up to date automatically. So this incremental approach dramatically reduces the processing time and cost, preserves your system of record, and integrates seamlessly with CI/CD pipelines to support a rapid, reliable deployment at scale. So we also give you Template Studio, the newest feature, where you can automate the presentation layer through drag and drop. Because previously it was templating code, but now it's just drag and drop. So it all runs on top of a model-driven approach, powered by reusable templates, And that means your business intent, transformation logic, and runtime execution are always aligned across multiple platforms like Snowflake. But this week, it's only Databricks because I'm in the Databricks conference. They don't want to hear about Snowflake, Microsoft Fabric, and more. So drop by. There's a link. You can get free demos here if you're here. And I want to meet Luan, but I'm missing his presentation. Anyway, I think my time is up, but thank you very much for having me.
Excellent, Jeff. Thank you very much. Up next for Data Vault Builder is Tobias. Go ahead.
Hi, Noel. Hi, everybody. Great to be here. We're proud sponsors of the Data Vault user group. So you ask yourself what Data Vault Builder is. It's a business model-driven data warehouse automation tool. By standardizing and automating, reduce implementation efforts on the IT side by delivering up to 4 times more value for business and data consumers. You can create a data model directly in the tool together with both business and IT, fostering collaboration across all project participants, involving business users in the solution design right from the beginning. The data model captures requirements, documents the solution, and serves as a catalog for existing objects, helping showcase the solution to business users. The Data Vault Builder is also an ETL tool. You can connect your sources, stage the data, and load it through all layers of your data warehouse. Following the Data Vault architecture, we support fast data observation with full historization and offer flexible information delivery in custom formats such as star schemas for data marts, 3NF for application interfaces, flat tables for data science, data products in data mesh environments, or prepared data for AI use cases. And the best part, everything is automated. Table creation, ETL pipelines, jobs creation, data lineage, and documentation. With native gate integration, Data Vault Builder supports distributed development in large data engineering teams. We're proud that 94% of our customers report project success within the first 6 months of introducing Data Vault Builder. We work with companies like our WJ Barnabas, CA, and Yale University, just to name a few. Yale actually presented in one of the user groups here in the past. I think it's in September 2 years ago. And if you're curious about Data Vault Builder, you can get your own free trial instance via the top right QR code and start exploring. Thanks for the attention.
Excellent. Thank you all for presenting today. Our sponsors will be presenting an award for at the end of the presentation. So thanks again to our sponsors. Jim, I believe you're up.
So I guess I should turn my mic on. Our next presenter is Sam Bendayan. Sam has been working in this business for quite a long time, and Sam has a unique aspect. And he started in the business side, and Dan always tells us business first, business process. And so Sam has done both business and technical. Plus, he's been a speaker at the WWDDC many times. He's also certified. And you can see he lives in South Florida, so he has fun with the weather. So take it away, Sam.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay. So thanks, everybody, for coming. So tonight we're going to talk about the why in Data Vault. So what's the reason for this presentation? Well, I've built quite a few Data Vaults, and this presentation is kind of like the benefit of my musings and aha moments of the past few years when I've run into certain issues and certain common misconceptions and certain very heated debates that should have never happened to begin with because they were all based on misconceptions. So I figured I'd kind of just share with everybody these experiences. This is, a little bit of a caveat. This is not any sort of official material from DVA or anything like that. These are my private musings, and nevertheless, I think you'll find them interesting. So what we're going to focus on is not just what Data Vault tells you to do, but why it tells you to do it. And the hope is that if you know why you're doing something, then when you run into issues, you'll be able to think your way through them instead of getting stuck and kind of having to always look for help. So we're going to talk about the agenda here for a second. Very simple agenda. We're going to talk about how we've always done things prior to Data Vault, right? And then the paradigm shift that Data Vault represents. This is very much of kind of like a philosophical modeling type of presentation, but we are going to get into some specific cases as well. So how does Data Vault do this? Well, Data Vault treats data as an asset, which means usability and accuracy are paramount. And also, these two priorities conflict sometimes. And so what do you do when they conflict? So that's it. That's the agenda. So let's jump into how we've always done things. So anybody who's worked in the data space for any length of time will know this situation. Bosses want everything yesterday. There's a lot of things they don't care about. They just want to see results, right? The data professionals, we're tired, we're overworked. Deadlines are always crazy. So we say, yeah, that's fine. I'll get you what you asked for, but I'm not going to get you anything else, right? I got too many things to do. The deadlines are insane. I'm just going to drag that data out and stuff it in a report. And, if anybody asks me how I got these numbers, good luck. Just be glad you got some data to begin with, right? So we're always too busy, never had a vision of how to properly do this. And then this last part is interesting. The boss, I've heard many bosses say this. They'll go back to their desks after a long day and, have a couple shots of scotch. And they'll say, these data guys, I don't get them. They just sit there in their little castle. They work horrendous hours. Nobody knows what they're doing. When I ask them to deliver something, it always takes too long. But, I don't even understand what's going on. And this is very frustrating for bosses because they'll say, you know what, I got all these articles that I'm reading and all these process engineers, and they tell me about things like TQM and Six Sigma and process improvement. But how can I improve a process that I can't see? Right? So this is kind of the setup for the paradigm shift. So here comes Data Vault to try to kind of solve this. So how do we do this? First of all, we consider that data is an asset. So first of all, what's an asset, right? If you know me, you know I hate buzzwords. So any word, I like to explain it and get to the bottom of it. So what's an asset? Well, anything of value that can provide future economic benefit, right? I got the picture of the gold bars. It's a perfect example of an asset. Now, is data an asset? So just ask ChatGPT. Lots of examples. I especially like the Coca-Cola's recipe, right? That's data. How much is that worth, right? You want more examples? We got more examples, right? All kinds of stuff. Anything from medical records and genomic data to search algorithms to whatever, okay? Data is a huge asset, okay? Think about industrial espionage focuses on the stealing of data, right? And it costs the US estimated between 210 to $630 billion a year, okay? So data has enormous value. And yet, think back for a moment how we've all treated data in many of our projects, right? We completely forget this, right? There's too much pressure. There's too much stuff going on. So the whole asset thing just goes straight out the window. So we forget it when we're designing a database. We get buried in all the gobbledygook, CVSs or CSVs and XMLs and whatever. Tight deadlines don't make things any better. And by the way, many of us have never treated data as an asset, so we wouldn't know how to do it to begin with, even if we were given a chance. So, having seen that, how do we treat data as an asset? Well, assets need to be usable and accurate. Okay, so for example, take a bar of gold. It needs to be usable. If you have a bar of gold that weighs a ton, not usable, right? 1 ounce coin, usable, right? If it's accurate in the terms of gold, we would say, is it really gold or is it fake gold, right? So if you have those two things, real gold and it's usable, then it's an asset. You can use it to do great things. So why usable? So someone can use it to add value, right? So in terms of data, and really in terms of a data warehouse, we give data to our users and data consumers, and they are the ones who turn data into value, right? Now, where do these people live? They live in the business world. Much as we may not like to hear that, that's where they live, right? And so that's usability. Now, accuracy, the data must reflect reality. So if you have a sales figure, it should tell you what the real sales were, right? And not some wrong number. Okay, that way we can make good decisions that will have the desired effects in the real world. And remember that bad data is not only worthless, it actually has negative value. It can actually cause damage, right? You can make bad decisions that actually cost you money. So how can we make data usable, right? Well, the first thing you do is you're dealing with business users. So you have to tie every piece of data to its counterpart in the business world. Secondly, we're typically in the data warehousing world dealing with many, many different sources. So we got to integrate them all. Users don't want to see the same piece of data from 20 different sources. They just want to see it once. So that's something we got to do for them. And we apply business rules. And that's it. That's how we make it usable. Now, how can we tell if our data is accurate? Well, first you got to determine if it's bad. This is the domain of data quality, which is huge. Many of you have no doubt heard presentations on this. And it's out of scope for this presentation, but there's also data audits, and we're going to talk about those. Because, we're always talking about auditability in the data vault, so we're going to dig into that a little bit. Secondly, if the data is bad, we got to determine when and how a piece of data went bad. So this is all about process visibility and visibility into what you're doing with the data. So did the source send it in a bad state, or did we do something to mess it up? And if so, when did we mess it up? Ensuring usable data. Okay, so how do we do this? Step one, we use business keys, right? That's how we tie the data to its counterpart in the business world, right? And this is, by the way, this is how Data Vault treats it as an asset. I kind of forgot to mention that. So we use business keys, step one. Step two, we integrate the data across all systems. That's a no-brainer. And step three, apply business rules. That's your business vault. Now, how do we ensure accurate data? This one's a little more complicated, but what we do is we keep data in its raw form, okay? Good, bad, or ugly. You're going to hear that a lot in this presentation. And secondly, you want to separate it from the business rules. So you need raw data separated from business data. We're going to talk about why. Secondly, you need to show all data changes, right? If you're going to show everything that's happened to the data, well, then you've got to store everything that happened to the data. And step three, we're going to calculate and expose data quality metrics. And finally, ensure that the raw data can reconcile to the source data set. It's a key component of auditability, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. The bonus of this is that when you do these things, you can pass a data audit, and you can also enable process improvement, and we'll talk about how that happens a little bit later. So let's dig into each one of these. Let's talk about business keys first. So why business keys? Well, first of all, your users who add value, they recognize these business keys, so they can use them to add value. Secondly, a business key, a true business key, if you've got multiple sources, chances are it will show up in all those multiple sources. So think of an SSN for a person. If you get 10 data files, chances are you're going to have SSN in those 10 data files, or something similar, some kind of sort of well-known ID. So this eases integration efforts. And we're going to show a little bit on how that works as well. And so in contrast, surrogate keys, they're not recognized by users. Their values tend to be different for the same piece of data in every source system. Think of those integer keys that we all know so well. And just so that you have an idea of where this occurs graphically or geographically in the data vault, this is in the hubs only. Okay, this is the only place where we deal with business keys. Everywhere else, it's kind of downstream. So now, before we move on, a little bit of a caveat. Suppose you find a surrogate key, but that's actually used by business users, and they use it in their conversations, and they talk about customer ID 37445, and they actually know what that means. Well, then guess what? If the business users are using it, even though it looks like a surrogate key, there may be a case to consider it a business key. Because what matters here is not static definitions. What matters is that you can give something to the users that is usable. So just some quick examples. Typical business keys, these are the good ones. SSNs, VINs for vehicles, tail numbers for airplanes. These are the ones you want to generally stay away from. Auto-incrementing integers, goods, and things like that. I've also found during my career that quite a few places implement their own little algorithms for unique keys. One such algorithm is called a timed key that I ran into one of my clients. So those as well you want to stay away from, generally speaking. So with that, we're going to talk about our first anti-pattern, source system data vaults. So what are these? You probably have heard this term quite a bit. However, I've seen a lot of misconceptions around this term. So let's define it. So this is what happens when you blindly use source system primary keys instead of going through the ontology taxonomy process to find your real business keys that the business users use. If you just say, oh, you know what, here's the source data model, take the primary key, make a hub out of it, done, you're creating a source system data vault. Okay, that's what it means. And so what do you end up creating? You end up creating a data vault, sure enough, but there's no real data integration. Think about a person ID. If you use integer surrogate keys from 10 different sources, well, you're going to have to store those all, and then you're going to have to map them to each other to be able to integrate the data. So you don't have real data integration. You've got this different pieces of data or IDs for the same real world objects, and they're also unusable. The users are not going to know what they're looking at. Now, can you make this work? Yes, of course you can make it work, but who wants to do this? You're going to go through tons of effort creating a whole bunch of mappings, right? And in the end, the value added is going to be probably close to zero. So there's no point in doing this. You want to stick to the business keys. Even though it's work, you got to talk to the business. You got to do ontologies, taxonomies, but this is how you set yourself up to add true value to the business. So those are the business keys. Now let's talk about integration a little bit. Now we're taking data from different sources and we're loading them into the same hubs and links if possible, right? So this is important because there is a limit to how much we can integrate. If you go too far, if you try to force integration too far, you will break auditability and you can violate the DV standards, the data vault standards. We'll get into that a little bit later. Now remember, the integration occurs in hubs and links only, at least insofar as integrating multiple sources into the same table. Typically, you don't do that with satellites. We'll illustrate why later on. And so here we see our professional stickman visual number one. These are my highly impressive graphical diagrams here. So here's a typical case where you get three files. With cars, they all use the same key. The VIN number, yeah, you put them into the same hub. That's easy peasy, no problem. Same thing with the buyers of these cars. If they all have the same keys, no problem. You load them into the same hub. This is what we call passive integration. We'll explain why it's called passive a little later on. So when the keys are the same, it's easy. Now, let's talk about the same kind of situation, but with links. Let's say now you have car sales files. You get three of them. They use the same keys. No problem. You load them into the same link. They represent the same unit of work, same type of data. Again, this is easy. Now, having said that, let's talk a little bit more. We're still on the topic of integration. So we're going to talk about unit of work. And unit of work is interesting because I find it to be something that is quite difficult to do right. And so consequently, it gets skipped a lot. And so we're going to talk about what happens when you skip it and some of the anti-patterns that result. So the unit of work are involved in this business transaction. Whether it's a transaction or an association, anything that's a link, you got to make sure you have the right business keys that were involved. Now, this is defined by the business, and this is difficult to figure out often, especially when you've got multiple sources. But don't despair. Like finding business keys, this is just as important. It is absolutely critical for integration, and we're going to explain why. Because even though you don't typically merge satellites together into one table, what the unit of work does do, if you define it properly, is it'll line up all the related satellites right next to each other. And then you'll know that those satellites really all represent the same thing. And you're doing this in the raw vault from the get-go. And so when you get to the business vault, this is one less thing that you need to do, because believe me, it can get messy in the business vault if you don't do this. So just some quick examples from the DV 2.0 book. We have the famous flights example where they talk about what happens if you don't get all the keys right and you start creating rows that never existed. You can think of other examples: writing new insurance policies, filing insurance claims, accounting transactions, healthcare claims, provider, client relations, things like that. In the medical world, there's all kinds of examples. It's a difficult area because it's very business specific, and you do need to talk to the business about this and get to the bottom of it, even though it's not very easy. So that leaves satellites, the third type of table. Now, satellites are different. And why are they different? Because if you look at the first two types of tables, you're dealing with simpler concepts, or at least or more unified concepts, a key and a relationship. Typically only have very few attributes, but context can have lots of attributes, can have hundreds of attributes. And so when was the last time you got two large files from two data providers that looked exactly the same in terms of structure, right? Probably never. And because of this, you're not going to try to integrate these into the same table. So typically you have one satellite per source file. Typically, right? There's exceptions to everything, but that's typically the standard. However, remember that they can be sort of, kind of partially integrated if at least you can put them next to each other under the same hub or under the same link where they belong. And that way, just by looking at the model visually, you've already done a very important piece of integration work. You know that they're related to each other. Whereas if you didn't do it right, they could be found all over the model, and you're going to have to go hunt them down later on to figure out which ones are really related to each other. Here's the next visual of satellites. So here we've got the same three files, but they have different numbers of columns, 5, 10, or 15 columns. Obviously, the tables are not going to look the same, so you're not going to put them in the same satellite. You'll put them in different ones. This is, however, what it's going to look like in the Data Vault model. You have your two hubs, you have your link table, and then look at those three satellites. Even though they're different structures, they're all hanging under the same link. And this is giving you a message. This is telling you these three satellites are all, they're the same concept. It's the same unit of work. They're related to each other. You're probably going to end up integrating these into the same reporting objects later on. I found that if you don't do a good job with unit of work, this becomes a nightmare to find out later on. Because like I said, the satellites could be anywhere in the model instead of being right next to each other, nice and neat. So let's get into another anti-pattern. Since we talk about how difficult unit of work is in creating link sets, here's an anti-pattern I found that is interesting. Some people say, you know what, it's difficult to build these link sets with a unit of work that's, proper to the business, etc. So, how about if I just skip building the link, okay? Let's say I've got a link that has 3 columns in it, 3 hubs, and I'm going to take 2 of those key columns, and I'm not going to worry about the hubs. I'm just going to stick them in the satellite as a key column in the satellite, in addition to the hash key and load date. I'm just going to put them in there, and for the remaining 1 key, I'll go to that single hub, and I'll make this thing a hub set. So now I've got a hub set with what I call a multi-key satellite, which means you have more key columns than the usual key column set in a satellite, which is your hash key and load date, right? That's what I mean by multi-key satellite. So I ran into this, and what I found is, these really don't replace links. Because now think about what happens if you've got 100 satellites out there. Now, which satellites are related to each other? If they're all hanging under a hub, even though they shouldn't be. Now you got a lot of satellites under a hub. And then when you want to get to know, like in the previous slide, where are those 3 satellites that are related to each other? Who knows, right? They may all be hanging under the same hub, along with 97 other satellites. They're all going to have different multi-keys in them. The columns may not even be named the same. And so it may be a nightmare just to get to the point where you say, you know what? Oh, these 3 are actually related to each other, only because you didn't go through the whole link unit of work exercise. Research your link unit of work, and you'll get around this problem. This seems to be attractive, this anti-pattern, because the link unit of work doesn't stop you. You can just keep moving. You can deal with that one satellite, design it, and move on, right? But it's a trap, because later on you can spend a lot more time unraveling the mess. What you're doing is you're kicking the can down the road. You're pushing integration to the business vault when it can be done in the raw vault. Now, you can't always do integration in the raw vault, but when you can, you should, right? Because as we all know that built business vaults, there's always too much going on in a business vault. Step 3 then, we've talked about business keys, we've talked about integration, and now step 3 in the usability equation is applying business rules. So first of all, what is a business rule? And again, this is another big area of misconception. A lot of people think that any rule is a business rule. right? Which is not the case. A business rule changes the values of the source data, not the structure necessarily, the values. So for example, unit of measure conversions, data type conversions, data fixes, things like that. These things are actually changing the value of the data. And this is a very important distinction because if you change the value of data in the raw vault, you are breaking the auditability, right? You're violating the standard. So that's the first thing about business rules. And secondly, they can change over time on their own, unrelated to the data sources. Why is this? Because business rules come from your business, the people that you work for, that you're building the data vault for. They're the ones who come up with these rules because they're telling you how they want to see the data. So regardless of how it comes to them in the sources, this is how they want to see it. So they can change at any time, whether the source changes or not. And so this gets us, with separating the business rules into business vault, gets you past a difficult situation when if the business rules change, you still got a copy of the raw data. You can just rerun your business rules and recalculate everything. If you don't have the raw data, you're lost, right? And these things can change because of industry fads and conversion and conventions that change all the time. And so let's talk a little bit more about this separation of raw data and business data. Obviously, we separate them into the raw vault and business vault, two completely separate layers, very important part of the methodology, right? And one of the reasons why it's important is because it establishes areas of responsibility. If it's source data, the sources are responsible. If they send bad data, it's on them. If you create bad data, applying business rules, that's on you. So it establishes those areas of responsibility. As I spoke before, you can handle business rule changes, or you couldn't do that if you don't have the data separated because they can change independently of the data sources. So having said this, another sort of anti-pattern, more of a misconception really, is a lot of times what I call data rules, sometimes you can call these hard rules, are confused with business rules. And so how does this happen? So let's talk about the differences. You may find a lot of data rules, and these are embedded, they're embedded in the data source, and they affect the metadata only. Usually it's missing metadata that you wish you had, but you don't. So they affect the structure, but they don't affect the values. Again, very important distinction. And we'll say why, we'll talk about why later on. So these rules are not going to change independently of the data sources because they are embedded in the data sources. So if the data source changes a rule, the data source is changed. So you just process it as a normal data source change, right? Using the strategies that went on in the data vault. Now, these data rules should be in the raw vault, because again, they're not causing you to change the values of the data. So you're maintaining auditability and they're embedded into the source system. So these are, I'll have a couple of examples later, but it's typically when you have missing metadata in the sources, at least in files that are coming to you. So this is what I call buried metadata, such as there's a couple of different sort of anti-patterns. One of them I called record type rules or repeating column groups. And we're going to go through those a little bit later on, kind of more in depth. And just remember that if you make your metadata more explicit, this makes the data more usable. In some cases, extremely more usable. So yes, you can do this in the raw vault and you should. With that, we're going to move over. We're done with usability, except we're going to see some cases later on. And now we're going to talk about accuracy. If you remember, there was two main pillars, there's usability and accuracy of how you turn data into an asset. So step one of accuracy, you keep the data in raw format. Okay, so that means no business rules applied in RV. Don't change any of the data values. You want to show the data in all of its gory, disgusting, embarrassing reality. Many data guys, we don't like to do this. It's embarrassing how things come in. You just want to fix it. Don't fix it. Let it sting and let it burn. Okay, and we're going to talk about why. No transformations are conforming or anything, not in the raw vault. That happens later. And this way, it is relatively easy to trace data from the raw vault back to the source data, which is a very important part of auditability. In addition to this, we add some metadata. We add load dates, we add record source columns, which are going to tell us when the data was loaded into the raw vault and where it came from, right? So this is an extra added feature that data vault adds in order to make auditability easier. Okay, step two of accuracy, you want to show all data changes. This one's a no-brainer, insert only. We know this already. Hubs, links, and sats, everything is insert only. We don't do updates. Why? Because an update will erase the prior state of the data it is updating. And we don't want to erase anything. We want to show every data change that was ever made, and obviously we don't want to delete anything either. So what happens with all this? Why is this so important? Well, when you have raw data, a copy of the raw data, with that comes process visibility. Okay, so remember our frustrated boss on the first slide? He doesn't know what's going on. These guys are working too hard and I don't even know why. Well, why is that? Because as data professionals, the boss doesn't care, so we're just going to fix things on the way in. We're going to do it in secret. We're not going to tell anybody about it. This is why we work all weekend and nobody knows why. But now we got to sort of change our mindset and we got to realize we're delivering something much, much bigger than just a simple report that a boss is asking for. And what we're delivering is data as a visibility tool, sort of a magnifying glass, which is going to allow you to peer into all the business processes of the data coming in. And if you can see it, you can improve it. Okay. And so this was one of the major aha moments that I got, I don't know, probably a couple of years ago, where I had heard about Six Sigma, TQM. This is when I really got it, when I realized, oh my God, data processes are a black box. Nobody knows what's going on. If you just simply show what's going on, you've taken the first step to be able to do a Six Sigma or a TQM and process improvement. So fixing data out of the process spoils data's value as an asset. Now you don't know if it's raw. You don't know who did what. You don't know what state it's in. So this is why you don't want to do this. You want to keep the data raw. We can fix it later, but in the raw vault, you want to keep a copy of that raw data. What do we do with this? Once you show the gory, nasty stuff, this is your chance to show your boss what you're doing on all those late nights. So how does this help? Well, it shows what's broken and how it's broken, right? When you talk to executives, you will have noticed complaining doesn't do any good. You have to show evidence. So when you've got the raw data, you can tell your boss, man, you know how bad this data is? Take a look at this. And then you show it to him. Okay, and you watch his jaw drop. Okay, it can help you calculate what it's costing the company. So you have a bad data source and you got to put it through 27 steps of cleansing. Well, then guess what? If that takes 3 hours a day, there's your metric. You can tell your boss, we're wasting 3 hours a day on this. Can you call the data source and fix this? Right? And now you can put a dollar figure on it, right? And executives will listen when they hear dollar figures. They won't listen when you complain, but they will listen to dollar figures. And finally, once the problem is fixed, you can measure how much better things got and then claim a victory with evidence to back it up. This is also going to get your executive's attention. It's going to give him the victories that he needs. And heck, maybe you can even get a raise out of it. Who knows? Let's go through a couple of just little visuals to reinforce what we talked about. So this is a typical data warehousing workflow, extremely simplified, right? And so you've got source data at the beginning, reports at the end, and this big black box in the middle. It's how we've always done things. But what happens? The auditors are angry, the bosses are confused, no one knows what's going on, and for some reason, the engineer is sleeping on his laptop, right? And nobody knows why. So it's a huge, very confusing situation. So what do we do in the data vault is we make this black box disappear and we show what is underneath. And now everybody can look at it. Anyone who's interested. The auditor comes in, he can look at it. You can show the executives what's going on. Everybody's happy. So that's the real secret behind process visibility. So in summary, what is it really doing here? What are we really doing here with this? Is we're taking data and we're saying, you know what? Data isn't just, some bits and bytes. It represents the reality of what your business is doing. This is a huge asset. And so if you can just show it, if you just let it tell you the story of what's really happening, you're going to know what's really happening. That is a huge step forward, right? And it's showing companies how to manage themselves by using these data assets, right? So data is an asset that you can use to do process improvement, to save money, to make more money. And this is enormous. And, I've heard a lot of people say many times, you can't sell data vault to execs. Well, but guess what? Execs will listen to this. The minute they understand this point, you're never going to have to explain to them again why they want data vault. This is enormous for them. So, not the least of which, you've got the Six Sigma and the TQMs and all those articles on CTO magazine that they can now get their hands on and actually do in their own companies, right? So this is enormous. So now, having said that, let's talk a little bit about data audits. Reason I added this section to the presentation is that everybody always, we're always talking about data audits and data vault, but I wonder how many people have really gone through one and actually know what's involved. So just very quickly, high level, Since data is an asset and it needs to be accurate in order to be valuable, data audits become very important because they verify the accuracy of the data. Right? So what is a data audit exactly? Or very simply put, it's when somebody asks, how did you get this data? How did you get this number? Right? Now these audits can be very formal, right? Or they can be very informal, and they can ask you, how did you get the number? What rules did you apply to get this? What did it look like when it came from the source? Right? These are typical questions. And it could be a whole team from Ernst & Young coming in and doing this, or it could just be your boss saying, that number doesn't look right. How'd you get that number? Right? Either way, you're doing the same process, right? You're doing the same kind of investigation. So I don't want to confuse everybody because there's many different kinds of audits. There's a list here, security compliance. We're not talking about these in this presentation. We're only focusing on data quality audits. So I just wanted to make that clear. And so, yeah, we're just going to focus on those. So how do you pass a data quality audit? Very simply, you just have to prove that the data is accurate, right? And how do you do this? It means you need to show everything you did to the data, right? Which means you need to show all it, you need to have all the changes stored, and you need to be able to reconcile it back to the sources, okay? So let's see if these next few items sound familiar, right? It must be in a well-organized and structured area so you can find what you're looking for. Imagine trying to look through all your sources, right? So check, we've got that in Data Vault. The raw source data must be kept and separated from any rules. Well, check, we got that too. All changes must be visible. Yep, we got that too. Check. And finally, all rules applied to the raw data must also be in a similarly centralized, organized layer. And we have that as well. So Data Vault has all of these elements. So the good news is, if you do it properly, you can pass a data audit, right? And remember also that the bigger the environment is, the worse this problem gets. I've talked to people that have done data warehouses with thousands of sources. Imagine just the tornado of chaos that you could have in an environment like that if it's not organized. And finally, then, you tell the story of the data. We pulled it from these sources. This is what we did to it. And this is how we got to the final number. And this is why our data is accurate. And now the auditor is going to be happy. Okay, so just another real quick visual in the same kind of environment we showed before. What's the auditor concerned with? He's concerned with the whole thing, from the source all the way to the user numbers. Okay, so this is why it's important to have all these layers in the solution so that you can, look at the data from stem to stern. Okay, just a couple of parting thoughts before we go to the next section. Audits can be tough, okay, very tough. So make it as easy as possible. And this is one of the things that the Data Vault is trying to do. A lot of these rules in the Raw Vault, they're meant to make data audits easier or possible even. Okay, and also remember this. Data Vaults are designed to last a very long time. Okay, they can last decades if you do them right. So imagine you building a Data Vault today and somebody else has to survive an audit with it 10 years from now. Okay, how's that going to work? So this is why you need to stick to the standards and you need to make it as clean as possible, because the more little, kind of off-standard or non-standard details you have, the much more difficult or maybe even impossible it's going to be down the road to survive a data audit. So keep that in mind. Now we're going to switch sort of into the, I guess this is the last big section of the presentation, and it's what happens when we've got usability and accuracy, but what happens when they conflict? Okay, which one wins? So this happened to us in a couple of different projects, and there were huge debates. There was multiple, some of these things got really, heated. But the bottom line, after I went through all this, I realized auditability has to win every time, right? We're talking about the Raw Vault here, right? Raw Vault design debates. Why does auditability win over usability? Because once you lose auditability, you can't get it back. Auditability is like your innocence as a child. Once you lose it, you don't get it back, right? You have to go and plow through all your sources to get that raw data back. Okay, and who wants to do that? Okay, however, if you design your raw vault and it's nice and auditable and everything, but it's not 100% usable by the users, it's okay. You still have the business vault. So this is why auditability is more important. because you still have the business vault to fall back on to make data usable, but you don't have that for auditability. So we're going to talk about a couple of cases where you see this conflict and how it gets solved. So now let's talk about some of these auditability principles in the raw vault. So first of all, there's a limit to integration. Okay, we talked about this a little earlier. We do passive integration. We don't just do integration. Okay. Also, can you adjust the structure of data sources in the raw vault? I ask this question a lot, and I'm surprised to hear many times people say, "Oh no, the raw vault needs to look like the data source, structure-wise." That's a huge misconception because the reality is, yes, we can. We can adjust the structure of the data sources. Okay. Think about how we're already doing it as part of the basic methodology. We restructure sources into hubs, links, and sats. Okay. I've never seen a data source that comes with hubs, links, and sats, right? And yet we restructure it. We do passive integration. We figure out the unit of work. We split satellites several different ways, not necessarily by source. We add metadata columns. So we do lots of things to change the structure. So for some reason, when I talk to people about especially buried metadata, and I say, we need to bring that out and sort of show it in the raw vault, people get shocked. They say, no, you can't do that. That's not in the source system. Well, I'm not changing the data. I'm changing the structure. And what I'm doing is I'm applying the rules that are in the source, but not in the source file. And let me explain what that means. And again, remember, explicit metadata whenever possible. This is why it's good to bring buried metadata out. And I'll have an example. If it sounds abstract, it is. I'll have a specific example in a couple of slides. So, passive integration versus integration, another big misconception. Why passive? Why not just integration? What does passive mean? It means we don't change the data values in order to force it to integrate into the same hub or link, right? Typically hubs. Okay, so we want to integrate them, right? If they naturally fit together, then sure, integrate them. But don't work at it too hard. Don't be too aggressive with the integration because you will have to apply different rules to change this data. And now you're applying rules in the raw vault, rules that you came up with, so they don't come from the data source. And now you're violating the data vault standard, right? So it's called passive because we don't want to force integrate the data. We just want to integrate it if it naturally fits. Okay, so now let's look at some specific cases. So here's one we ran into, healthcare ID providers. Providers could be doctors, surgeons, nurses, even ambulance drivers. So that's the business we're talking about here. And so we had a case where this area of healthcare is not very standardized. And so we had one source that had a 1-column key, the second source had a 2-column key, and the third source had a 3-column key. Okay, I'm not making this up. Same thing, same providers. So there was a bunch of heated debates as to, well, why don't we integrate them into the same hub? After all, it's good to integrate things into the same hub, isn't it? So let's take all these columns, let's concatenate them together, let's put pipes in between them, and let's just slam it all into one hub, right? Many people thought that was a great idea. And on the face of it, it doesn't sound too bad, except when you consider that it's not passive integration, right? You're changing the data values. You need to figure out what order you want to concatenate the columns in. You need to figure out what delimiter you're going to put in there. You need to figure out if you're putting delimiters before and after. All these are decisions that you're making. They don't come from the source, and they're not even coming from the business either. So you're just putting these rules in the raw vault. Now, if you have an audit, it's not going to look like the source. It's going to make it a lot harder to follow. So this is not the right solution. And also, we talked about process visibility. Well, guess what? Now you're not showing the data as it comes from the source. Now, if you want to show your executive how bad the data source is, you really can't because you've modified it. Okay, and like I said before, you're applying business rules. So what's the right solution? Well, it's different structures. So even though they all refer to providers, you have to use different hubs, right? That way it's auditable, right? You see the data as exactly as it comes in. The source data problems are clearly visible. You can tell the exec, hey, look, we're getting 3 different keys for the same business concept. Okay. Yeah, this is what we got to deal with. Okay. Now it's visible. Okay. So we'll just have another little visual example in case this helps of a not so happy path where you have 2 files with the same key and the third file with some other key. They're going to go into 2 different hubs. Okay. That's for the car. Same thing happens with a buyer file. 2 of them use SSN. The other one uses name and date of birth. So you can't put them into the same hubs. Okay. So when it comes to the links, again, same type of example. Instead of SSN and VIN, you have this ridiculous key from the third file. So you're going to have to use a different link. They're different keys in the link. And even though ultimately they're going to get integrated, it needs to happen in the business vault. Because this way you have an auditable raw vault, and then the user still has his usable data in the end. Okay, so now let's talk about buried metadata. There's 2 different cases of these. There's hidden satellites and hidden links. So if you've ever dealt with mainframe data, some mainframe data, or it doesn't have to be mainframe, but this is kind of an anti-pattern in some sources, they'll have a record type column in a file, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And what you start noticing is that each record type has a completely different structure, right? So if it's 1, it uses different columns than if it's a 2, right? So if a file contains 50 columns of data, record type 1 will use 20 of these columns. The other 30 are always null. Record type 2 is the opposite. It'll use the other 30 columns. The first 20 are null. So what's happened here? What's happened here is that the source file is not an accurate representation of what the data really is. Okay? There is buried metadata that is not in the source file. You probably have to go dig up some documentation that's going to tell you, hey, yeah, we actually took 2 files and slammed it into 1. Sorry. Record type 1 is this, record type 2 is that, and they have different structures. So the solution, my opinion, you create 2 satellites, 1 for each record type, with a proper structure for each record type. Now, I actually went through this. There was kind of a really gnarly case of this that I ran into recently, and I couldn't even find a primary key on the file because there were like 13 different record types. And even if you use all the columns in the file, you couldn't get, you still had duplicates. So I'm trying to make a satellite out of this and thinking, what's the key to this thing, right? So when I broke it up according to record types, guess what? I ended up with like 13 satellites, and they all had good keys, right? And guess what? The users absolutely loved it. And they said, wow, no one had ever figured this out before, right? Because the metadata remained buried in the documentation. And what a lot of people had done was they had just taken it and just kind of slammed that all into one satellite. If it gets duplicates, well, you can make it a multi-active and we'll figure it out later, right? But now you're not doing anything with it on the raw vault, you're just dumping it in there. So when you, as I say, exhume this buried metadata, so to speak, you're now making the data vault structure very explicit, and people are going to be able to understand it much easier. Now you're going to tell me, but hold on a minute, it came from 1 file. You just created something that doesn't exist in the source, right? And I will counter by saying it does exist in the source. I didn't make the rules up. They were in the source. They just weren't in the file. They were buried in documentation at the source. I just exposed it. And if people say, well, you know what, now it's going to be hard to audit it because the file doesn't look like your satellites, well, it's probably going to be a lot harder to try to decipher that file with 13 tables embedded in it than it is going to be to follow the raw vault design that has a separate satellites. So yeah, it's not ideal. It's a difficult situation, but I think this is the best solution to it. The second case of buried metadata has to do with repeating groups of columns. And in some cases, these could be undeclared link tables. So for example, you got a flat customer file. You're getting 1 file. The file has 3 phone number columns, phone 1 to phone 2, phone 3. Okay. You might be tempted into saying, you know what? It's a customer key, put it in a hub. It's a hub sat, slam all the other columns into the satellite and you're done. Okay. But what if phone numbers are important for analysis? What then? Well, it turns out because you have a repeating group, And of course, for those who know the normal forms, you're violating first normal form, right? It's a repeating group. What it really means is you have a relationship that you have embedded into a table. So a relationship is a link. So what you can do is you take those 3 columns and you make a customer phone number link, and you put the phone numbers in there instead, right? And now you've got it much more explicit metadata instead of 3 phone number columns in a satellite that maybe has 100 columns. Now it's out in its own link, very visible, and you see what's going on, right? So it needs the link table. Again, same, I got the same arguments. Wait, there was no link table in the source. Why did you create one in the raw vault? Because it really is there. It just wasn't apparent in the file. Okay, but it really is there. So in summary, Data Vault is a huge paradigm shift. Okay, so data is an asset. That's the first thing. Okay, usability and accuracy are very important. For usability, we talked about the business keys. We talked about passive integration. We talked about exhuming buried metadata and applying business rules and how we're going to keep those separated from the raw data. And all of this helps the usability of the data. Okay, obviously the rules are separated as well. The second topic was accuracy. So we want to keep the raw data. We want to make all the data changes visible, right? Insert only. And this is going to enable the auditability and the process improvement, like we saw earlier. And finally, when they conflict, these two, okay, in the raw vault, accuracy is your first priority, auditability. Usability is secondary, obviously still critical, right? If you can make the data more usable without breaking auditability, you need to do it in the raw vault. But if it breaks auditability, don't do it in the raw vault, do it in the business vault. And then finally, of course, in the BV, usability is your first priority because that's your last layer before you get to the users. So finally, a couple more points. Clear as mud. Okay, well, one of the things that is a bit confusing to people when they hear all this is they say, well, there's a lot of nuance in Data Vault. It's not simple. You're right. It's not simple, right? We're not just listening to the business. We're not just looking at the data sources. We're doing both. So sometimes you have to listen to the business and sometimes you don't. So what's the line, right? When do we listen to the business? Well, when you're looking at business keys, right, via the ontology taxonomy process, when you're doing the link unit of work, that comes from the business rules, obviously. Okay. If you're doing agile project management, as I hope everyone is, the priorities come from the business, right? You may want to do this one area, but if the business value is somewhere else, that's what you need to do first. This is where you listen to the business. And conversely, when do you not listen to the business? When you're designing for auditability, right? You're the data vault expert. Excuse me. So you know how to build data vaults. They know their business. So when you're designing for auditability, you need to make sure you do the right thing in spite of what the business says. And trust me, they'll thank you for it later. When you split satellites, in many cases, you're not doing it because of business reasons. Data fixes things like data types and performance issues. Most of the time, if it requires a design change, you're not going to listen to the business. You're going to do what's necessary for performance. And that is that. Any questions?
There was one just from Saqib earlier. He wanted to know what what is the name of that from your business transformation? The overpunch. You had the word overpunch in there.
Overpunch. Overpunch is it's an old mainframe standard. It was in the days of when saving a byte or two really meant something. And so what they did is they took numbers and they created an algorithm to turn them into alphanumeric values. And then you had to know what they had done and you have to reverse it in order to get the real number. So that's a typical case where, you need to obviously do that translation or it's not even a number you're looking at, right? Like you don't even know what you're looking at. So that's what overpunch is.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay.
So
not
blast
many.
from the past. I am popping up I'm going to share right now. Noel. First of all, thank you, Sam, very much. Appreciate it.
Okay.
We only have a few minutes left. We're going to squeeze in if you have any questions, you can always email DVNog on Sam's presentation, and he will get your questions and can answer you, okay, directly. Right, Sam?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we're going to go right into the prizes because I'm sure everybody's like, wait, who won? Noel, you want to take it from here? I'm going
All
to
right.
go forward.
Okay. Do you have them from top left to bottom right? Is that how
I
you have them
believe
set up?
so. Let me pull up
All right.
the slide.
There we go. Resultant is up first with a $50 Amazon gift card to Bruno Conejeros. Up next, Data Rebels, $50 Amazon gift card to Denis Farias. And Eon Collective has presented an Audible gift card, not one that you can hear, but one from Audible itself. Jorge Castillo has won that one. From Amazon, a $50 gift card from Warescape to Fritjor Eriksson. And Vault Speed will present a $50 Amazon gift card to William Lima. Seven Rivers will present a $50 Amazon gift card to Renan de Moraes. And Data Vault Builder, $50 Amazon gift card to Joao Batista Campos Jr. ER Studios Suhitia Dutta. And that's it for our winners this week. Congratulations to all of them. I did notice a couple times people asked if this recording would be available later, and we did answer that with our YouTube channel, and that's DVNOG the letter U, tube, I believe. So it's YouTube at DVNOG, the letter U, tube is our channel. Feel free to subscribe, click the like button, and all that fun stuff. Thank you.
It's interesting that all the winners are first timers at DVNOG.
That's right.
Oh.
That's right. We had a bunch to pull. I think we had, when I ran this, was over 60 people, new users, and
Yes, 70%.
Yeah.
All right,
so
for the
thank
rookies.
you all. Our next event will be on September 10th at 4 p.m. So we don't have a topic yet, but we will certainly have that filled in. So keep your eyes out, and I think we can probably get Juan back. So a little bit more on maybe Databricks with Data Vault, some other topics. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to our board for the support, our sponsors and our sponsor speakers. If they're left here, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and for sponsoring us. We couldn't do this without you. So, and to our speakers, thank you so much, Sam. Juan is already delivering something at Databricks, so appreciate everyone's time. See ya next quarter.